Hello, everyone. Welcome. As you are getting connected to your audio and getting all set up, if you don't mind just dropping in the chat which high school you are from, I would love to see who we have represented today. Okay, I see Bothell, I see Legacy. These are coming in direct messages, so that's why you're not seeing them in the chat. Where else? Woodinville, Bothell. I should have done a poll and see who wins. Inglemore. Awesome. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you for playing along with me. Are you all able to see my presentation? Can I get some thumbs up emojis or a yes in the chat, something to indicate that you are all seeing my slide right now? Awesome. Thank you. So welcome to How College Decisions Are Made. Before we get too far, let's start with who am I and why am I on your screen. So my name is Mariesa Negosanti. I am the Assistant Director of Admission, a regional representative for DePaul University in Chicago, Illinois. I'm actually a regional, as many of us are tonight on these presentations, and I live in Sacramento, California, but I work with all the families in Washington, Oregon, and the state of California. So if you are ever interested in applying to DePaul University, I'm your girl. I'm the one you'll work with. My email is listed there, and you can always feel free to send me messages and emails if you've got any questions about DePaul or anything about this presentation as well. I'm happy to chat about it further with you all. Our agenda for today, we're going to go over the college profile and application review. Largely, we're going to spend the most of our time tonight on what is considered. What are the things that we are looking at as college admissions representatives when we are reviewing applications? How are we really coming to the decisions that we do? That's where I'm going to spend the bulk of my time. I will pause and ask for questions from you all as well, and really give you the chance to ask questions. I hope I have time at the end as well, but I'm going to ask for questions as I go, just so there's anything you want clarity on as I'm chatting. Please feel free to let me know and use the chat box to do that. There was already a question right now saying, is this posted anywhere after today? The answer, I believe, is yes. They are having us record these sessions, so you should have access to them after the fact as well. And of course, at the end, I will drop my email again, and any links or anything that we chat about tonight, I can always pop that in the chat for you all too. But does this sound good to everyone? Any questions before we get the ball rolling? All right. So first up to talk about is the college profile. What do I mean by the college profile? Largely, it's when we're making admission decisions as college admissions representatives, a lot of it is coming from the top, right? We have institutional priorities that are set by the president, set by our senior leadership at our universities. What are our goals? What are our enrollment goals? What are the goals for the institution overall? And how can, the admission office support that? And what kind of students are we looking for to engage in our community? These are kind of big questions that then kind of get dwindled down into the actual review process. So when you're looking at different admissions type, each institution is going to have different admission types. One of those being open enrollment. Think of this largely as community colleges, right? Nearly anyone can go to a community college as long as they meet specific qualifications, and really it's a certain GPA or ability to enroll in the institution as well. So open enrollment is non-selective, which brings us to selective. Most schools in the country are going to fall into the selective category. It means that it does require an application materials beyond just the transcript, versus at a community college, oftentimes they just require that transcript. And it means that they also don't admit all students, versus a community college where everyone is admitted and is able to enroll in coursework. So again, most schools are going to be selective, but there are also highly selective institutions which accept less than 50% of students who apply. And then those most selective, so those Ivy League schools and comparable institutions, are going to be those most selective ones, which are accepting fewer than 15% of applicants. Very few colleges fall into this category. The average acceptance rate at most schools overall is 66%. So most schools are not going to fall into that highly selective or most selective category. So it's something to keep in mind as you're looking at different schools to apply to and seeing where you might fall, in terms of admissions type, admission profile, and what you might be looking for in an institution as well. Other things that we're thinking about is our profile as an institution. And what I mean by that is, what is our average GPA? What are our SAT scores, average ACT scores? Is that something that we're looking at? Is that something we're considering when reviewing our applications? Is it important to us to get students from all over the world, right? Are we looking at different states, different regions? Do we need students from certain areas? Some schools might have certain, diversity initiatives that they're recruiting students from different states if they don't have them, especially those might be small schools in the Northeast, for example, that are generally local, serving their local population, but would love to have students from further out west. Those are examples of schools that might then do some outreach out there and make sure that they're reaching those students. So these are things we're thinking about as we're going through our whole review cycle and seeing what kind of students we're looking to shape our class with. Majors offered is a big one, right? That's something you're considering. If you're a student who's interested in pursuing engineering, you're not going to look at a school that doesn't have any engineering programs, right? That doesn't make any sense. And likewise, we're looking for the same thing. So if we have a student who's applying and on their application, they write engineering, we might reach out to that student and say, hey, we noticed this is an area that you're interested in. We actually don't offer that major. So you might want to consider that when applying to us. Are there other majors you're interested in, and that's why you like us as an institution? That's great. That's one thing. But it has to be something that you're going to fit with us and we're going to fit with you. But it needs to make sense practically as well. Deadlines are going to be different at every institution that you apply for as well. And that also kind of impacts our process, right? When are we reviewing those applications? When do students need to submit? What is our timeline of communicating with students about their application process? And new programs is another one too. So if an institution has a new major that they're adding, maybe a school is for the first time going to offer nursing as a major. They're going to have to recruit heavily or look for students who are interested in biology, in the health sciences, right? Because they want to make sure they're filling their classrooms as well. So these are all kind of things that colleges are thinking about as they're going through that review cycle to see if a student's going to fit in with their community. Certainly not every student needs to fit all buckets, right? So that's also what we talk about. It's just more about shaping and making sure that we're hitting different goals that are set by the institution as well. Questions on anything that I just kind of went over before we get into the application review? All right, I'll keep going. So there are two different types of review that a school or an admission office might do, and that's holistic or formulaic. So holistic is most common that you will hear. You probably heard that term before, and if not, you certainly will as you move forward. But it is more common in schools that are smaller, selective, and or private schools. But it's also just a general good practice within admissions review, right? So it means that every single material that you submit is going to be reviewed, even if the school doesn't necessarily require it. If you submit an additional recommendation letter or something to us, we're going to review it and to consider it as part of your application. It also usually means that multiple pairs of eyes are on your application, so there might be more than one reader. There might be a longer process. There might be an initial review, a second review, and then you also might bring it to committee. It depends on the institution and their process, but usually more than one people are going to review that application. In a formula area, only specific portions are considered, and it's usually only one reviewer. And that is common at those larger, less selective public institutions, and that's not because they don't want to review your file. It can also just be because they don't need to. As long as you're meeting some of their basic requirements, they want you to attend their university, so they're not going to review that whole process. It's also sometimes just the volume issue, right? At some of those large universities that have upwards of 50,000 students, they're getting so many applications that it's just A, not necessary, and B, just not possible sometimes to review all of those materials. But usually it's in a case where a student would be not considered for any reason, then multiple people are still looking at that application and they would look at all of the information. So it just kind of depends on the institution's process in particular. There are also different deadline types. So I started to kind of talk about this a little bit as well. Rolling admissions is when you can apply at any time and you could receive a decision at any time. So instead of some schools, you apply in the fall, you'll hear back in the spring, or you'll hear back early. With rolling admissions, it's kind of up in the air and up to the institution. Some schools will release admission decisions every day. Some will release decisions every week. It just depends how they organize their rolling admission, but that means that there is no kind of structured timeline for those schools. Oftentimes you see this with open enrollment institutions as well, right? They're going to make a decision very quickly for you. Early decision is almost the opposite of that. It is the binding option. So early decision schools, you apply to only one school, early decision, and it means that if you are admitted to that institution, you must attend that institution. So it is that early option. Benefits to that are that you certainly know sooner, which is nice. Usually that's happening in December. You'll receive those decisions back versus maybe like March or April from other institutions that you might be applying to. So there's certainly benefits to applying early. Similarly, with early action, you will also hear back early, oftentimes in December, but that is not binding. You can apply to multiple schools early action if you'd like to, but you don't have to commit to them the way that you would have to with early decision. So keep that in mind. And then there's regular decision, also sometimes heard of single deadline. So regular decision is really just a later timeline for everyone. Usually the deadline for that is in like January or February, depending on the institution, and you'll hear back in March or April, depending on the institution. And a single deadline means there is just the one deadline for an institution. They don't have it early or regular or late. They just have the one deadline for you to choose from. So those are the kind of different types that you might be looking at and you might be considering applying for. Questions on those at all, on those different deadlines? All right. Next up is the kind of big section I mentioned. So what are we considering? What are we looking at when we're reviewing applications? And it's many things, right? Depending on the institution, they're going to look at everything differently or more intently. But overall, you can expect us to be looking for the rigor of your curriculum. Are you taking honors? Are you taking AP classes? We're going to be looking at your GPA and any trends that we see on your transcript. If we're looking at an institution that looks at test scores, we're going to look and see if you fall within our averages. We're going to look at your activities and what you spend your time doing, any awards or attributes you've won. Your essay, of course, everyone talks about the college essay being an important piece. Supplemental information refers to supplemental essays. So some institutions that you're applying for might have additional essay requirements specific to their institution, in addition to that general college application that you'll be submitting. So keep an eye out for those. Recommendation letters from your teachers. Demonstrated interest is a term you may or may not have heard before. I'm curious by a show of virtual hands or just typing in the chat. Does anyone know what demonstrated interest is or has at least heard the term before? Show of hands if you've heard the term demonstrated interest before. Okay, I've got one yes. One yes. I'm seeing no hands. So I don't know if you just don't know how to use the function or if you're not able to because of a setting that I chose, or if no one has heard of demonstrated interest. And so specifically, I like to highlight that because it can be pretty crucial at certain institutions who track this piece of an application process. Essentially, what demonstrated interest means is that if you show any interest in an institution by sending an email, logging into your application portal, attending a college fair, attending an interview and meeting with an admission counselor, going up to a college admission counselor at a college fair and filling out their information card. These are all ways that we track demonstrated interest, and it shows that you are interested in our institution. Some schools will consider this in their review process. So a student who has shown more interest over another student might get admission over the student who did not show any interest in that institution. It is important to mention that because it really can make a difference at certain schools. So as you're looking into institutions and applying to different schools, I would encourage you to ask them if they track that. And if they do your best to sign up for a virtual information session or go on tour and visit the school. That's a big one, right? Campus visits. If you can go to a tour, an information session, things like that, it just shows that you're interested in the school and that maybe you'd be more inclined to actually attend the institution if you were admitted. So important to keep that in mind. And then lastly, these things are usually optional depending on what programs you're applying for. But if there's an art portfolio, if you're applying for an art program, or an audition, if you're looking for theater or music, those are things to keep in mind too, and things that we would consider in the application process. To dig into these a little bit more, personal information is certainly a common one. This is a pretty easy one, right? These are the questions that we're going to ask you. But it is important for us to have that family history, especially. It really just gives us context to who you are, what your home life has looked like potentially, and how that may have impacted your academics in some way. So that context is certainly really important for us. Disciplinary issues is something we're going to ask about as well. Oftentimes we see students who have a wide range of disciplinary issues. It can be something really small. Like one time I had a student write to me that she got a detention because she drank her water bottle during class, and she wasn't allowed to do that. And she was distraught about it. And I was like, you got to drink water. I don't know why you're not allowed to drink water in the school. I get it. It's fine. So certainly some more extreme issues as well. So we will get a range there, but it's certainly important if you've had any disciplinary issues at school that you let us know about it, because sometimes the counselor will tell us about it in a rec letter if the student doesn't. So it's better to kind of have your side of that story, your experience as well. When it comes to rigor and your curriculum and the courses that you are taking, we get a lot of questions, about what classes you should take senior year, or if I got this grade, does that mean I won't get in? And it's so hard without the full picture to be able to answer some of those questions, but to give you a little bit of insight into what we're looking for, it's really what I love to see is that you know yourself and that you're able to kind of adjust accordingly, right? So when you see the word grade trends, what we're really looking for is, are you adding on an honors class each year? Are you increasing your personal difficulty level for yourself? That's going to look different for each student, right? I don't expect a student having no honors classes at all, and then senior year, all of a sudden they're in like 5 AP classes and then they're doing poorly. That's not going to be particularly right for that student, right? What you like to see is students adding on rigor as best they can to their schedule and still doing well. I often see students, maybe sophomore year, they've added 2 honors classes. Junior year, they add, a bunch of APs, and all of a sudden they're not doing as well. And then senior year, they continue to do a ton of APs and continue to do poorly. And that's just poor judgment, right? We want our students to challenge themselves, but within their realm of possibility. You all have a lot going on. You have extracurriculars. You might have part-time jobs. You've got to take care of a sibling at home. There's a lot going on, and it's okay to self-correct. So if that junior year comes and you add on APs and you're not doing as well in them, senior year, you want to challenge yourself, but make it realistic. It's okay to have a little bit of a lighter load. if you're also then doing well in those classes again. And you can kind of explain that to us, and we're looking for those kind of things within your application. Weighted versus unweighted GPA, some schools have different averages that they're looking at. A lot of schools will also recalculate GPAs. So it's not super important. Like, I wouldn't want you to worry about your particular GPA because it's going to look a little different at every school that you're applying to. But some schools also want to look at class rank. If it's available, more and more schools are not ranking their students, which is how they determine like valedictorian and salutatorian. It's where it's helpful for us in the review process, if it's available, is just to see where you are in context of the rest of the students at your school, right? So sometimes we get students who are like, oh, I'm the valedictorian. And then we find out that 25 people share the valedictorian status, which isn't to take away from that accomplishment, but it just helps give us context to the GPAs that we might be looking at this school in particular. Or if I see, a 4.8 GPA at one school, I might be like, wow, this student is incredible. And then you see that the highest GPA is like a 6.8 because there's a weird scale at this school with the APs and honors. So it really is dependent, and it just kind of helps give us some context as reviewers when we're looking at certain schools. And again, the context of where you attend school in general is also what we're looking at. So we'll look at that, the courses that are available to you, right? Some schools might not have honors classes, they may not have AP courses, and we're looking to see if those are even available to you before making any judgments about their rigor. So those are kind of things that we're keeping in mind as we look at this information. Test scores is a big one we get questions on. As I'm hoping many of you know by now, during the pandemic, many schools moved away from requiring SAT or ACT scores, and that's stuck at a lot of schools. So many are test optional, if not test free nowadays. The difference being with test optional, it's up to you as an applicant if you want to submit your testing, versus some schools being test free means they're not going to look at them at all. And in fact, like if you submit them, they will remove them or redact them from the file so that they can't be interpreted as part of the application review. So important distinctions there. Totally up to you if you want to submit with those test optional schools. If you think that your test score is an accurate representation of your ability and you think it will help your application, maybe you didn't do so well in certain grades in high school and you think the testing will prove that you are equipped for certain areas, I would encourage you to submit it. But if it's not required and you're not sure or you think it might hurt you, don't do it. No harm, no foul. You do not have to submit that. Most schools will super score, which means if you take the test multiple times, they will take the highest from either test and use that as your accumulative score. So that way, if you do better in one section on one day, but not the other, we'll just take the best of those two things and kind of give you the benefit of the doubt with those other ones. Some schools do require you to report your test scores either officially or unofficially. It kind of depends. I would say more often than not nowadays, most schools are just asking you to self-report your test scores, and then come the point of actually deciding to enroll at an institution, they would then require you to send that official report in to kind of just further proof that you actually did receive that score. But during the application process, a lot of schools have moved away from that requirement just because there is usually a cost associated with submitting your official scores from College Board or ACT. So something to keep in mind as you're looking at different applications as well. And then for international students, if there are any of you in the room, some schools do require English proficiency exams, and you would have to take that separately and submit those separately as well. Your activities, your resume, what are we looking for here? I often get a lot of questions or even beliefs from folks that you have to have a very long and lengthy list of activities. Otherwise, it's not enough for institutions. Going back to that kind of conversation we had earlier, there are some schools that might not even make it to your activities list because you already have been admitted before they even get to your activities list, right? So keep that in mind as you're pressuring yourself so much to do these things and to make sure that you have all of this involvement. Obviously, we want you to be involved. We want you to be involved because you want to be involved, right? We don't want you to go out and do things just because you think that's what colleges want you to do. We want you to do the things that make you happy and that fill your time and feel fulfilling to you as an individual. And then we want to know about it, right? So here we're really looking for, how do you spend your time? What do you spend your hours doing during the week? Are you a student leader at a student organization? Do you have a part-time job? Did you have an internship over the summer maybe in something that you think you might like? Do you volunteer? Is that who you are and you love to volunteer for different organizations? Are you involved with your church? Do you have family responsibilities at home? Maybe you have 4 younger siblings that rely on you after school, and so you can't do after school activities because you have to go home and make sure that you're helping out at home. Athletics is a big one. Maybe you are involved with sports. Maybe you have a club team that you're involved in, but not playing for the varsity level at school. That's important information for us to know too. So there's a lot of different things that we're looking for here. Certainly, the pandemic has impacted this a lot, and we know that as well. So we keep that in mind as we go through applications, that some activities have been cut or were changed and look a little bit different now. So those are things that we're also kind of considering as we go through this process. And it is okay to brag about yourself here, right? That's kind of the point too. So if there are things that you are proud of, don't feel like you don't want to include something because it sounds too showy or anything like that. Like, please let us know everything that you're doing. It sounds creepy, and it is. We want to know what you're involved in, and we want to know like who you are, right? Because this is all that we have to go on. And oftentimes we're asking the question, what will this student look like on our campus? What would they be involved in on our campus? And that's an important question for us to be thinking about. Other attributes you might have gotten, any awards you may have received if you're involved in like National Honor Society, things like that, that might go here. If you're involved with, I think Quill and Scroll is like a journalism award that students might receive. And anything that you can include, you would include here. Any maybe certain schools have academic awards, like a history department award and things like that. You can include that information here. I would also encourage you, this hint is very helpful, I think, providing explanations or a quick definition of what you're talking about is so helpful. While it may be really prevalent at your high school, the award that you're talking about, we might have no idea what it is that you're referring to. So anytime that there is an acronym, and that goes for clubs or organizations that you're part of in the activities list too, just do your best to kind of give us a quick synopsis of what it is, rather than just putting the name there, right? So that we know what is involved with that. All right, and then giving us insight into your unique values, your goals, personality. Demonstrate these things as best you can, and do it through a story or an experience in your essay specifically. Make sure you're editing your essay. It's helpful to read it out loud. I know that sounds silly, but it is helpful to do that. And have multiple people give you feedback, not just a school counselor, not just a parent, right? Everyone has different perspectives and different opinions when it comes to the college essay. You have one person on one day who will love an essay, and another day they might not like it at all. So it's really hard. It's very subjective. And that is why I tell students, really don't focus so much on what you think we want to read, because what I might want to read and what another rep might want to read is very different. And you can't predict that. So really just share with us what you want us to know about yourself. It's a great opportunity to think about where else on your application you haven't been able to share something that's important to you. Sometimes our application doesn't always offer you the chance to talk about something like that might be important to you. So this is a great opportunity for you to really do that and shine in a different way. Supplemental information is important for us as well. Again, I mentioned those essays earlier where some schools might have school-specific institutional questions. A big one might be, why are you interested in our institution in particular, right? That's a very common supplemental question that you might have to answer in an essay. They're not full essays. They're meant to be little snippets. The main application essay is maybe 600 words. These are usually half that size at best. So really just be thinking about some personal insight for yourself, and think about the institution missions that you're applying to, and really just speak to the prompt. They often are really wanting you to answer that prompt specifically, which is why they intentionally chose it. So just be mindful of that as you go through those additional essay requirements that you might see. Other additional information is important too. There's an example there of something that might have impacted an application. What I will say is, anytime that you feel like you want us to have more context for your application, but you weren't able to include it elsewhere, this is kind of the place to do it. So, for example, if you did adjust your courses, as I was mentioning, say junior year you didn't do so well, so senior year you decided to do a lighter load and chose different coursework because of that. If you want us to know that, like you had those thoughts, that was your thought process, this is why you made the decision you did to take certain classes, you can always let us know that. I also have students who say, you know, I was approved to take like an AP math class, but it didn't fit in because it was offered the same time as like this journalism class that's really important to me and my actual future goals. That's great information for us to have, right? A lot of times classes you want to take are going to overlap and you can't, your hands are tied. You have to choose something. So anytime something like that happens or there's any additional information you want us to have, please share that with us. Or if something's going on at home and was the reason you got a bad grade, let us know, right? These are things, we're humans too, reading these applications, and we want to be able to best support you as well. Recommendation letters, some schools require them, some schools don't. Oftentimes you'll see a counselor recommendation required and 2 teacher recommendations. We're really just looking to see how you act in the classroom here. This is what's really important to us when it comes to this. So we just want to know, are you interacting with others? How are you interacting with others? Are you a good teammate in a group project? Those are kind of things that we're looking for with those letters. And if you do have multiple letters, ensure that they are speaking about different aspects of your life. And what I mean by that is if it's not a teacher writing that recommendation, maybe it's a coach or somebody at work. Those are great examples of additional context to who you are, but we don't need you to submit 7 teacher recommendation letters, right? 2 is enough. We've learned how you are in the classroom. If you're going to send additional letters, we really just want to know you in different aspects of your life at that point. I talked about demonstrated interest heavily, and we are running low on time. We only have a minute or 2 left. So I will skip this because I did cover that earlier as well. But again, if you can demonstrate interest in any of these institutions you're applying for, highly recommend doing that. Questions. I do see one in the chat. It says, I'm a freshman, so I'm not applying anytime soon, but is there any way to track all of the service, work, and awards that you get? I would say you could start a Google Doc. That wouldn't be the worst idea. And actually just start keeping just general notes for yourself. That way, when it comes time to actually fill out the application, you can just pull right from that Google Doc already and you won't forget anything. That's a great idea to start that now. I remember like scrambling to figure that out when I was applying and think back to freshman year and things that I was involved in. So I think I would recommend starting a Google Doc and having that available to you. Other questions? This is my information again. I will type it out too. And then I know there is a survey that they want everyone to fill out. I think they're going to share it with you all later as well, but I threw the link up there too, in case you don't have that yet or want it. So any other questions? I will stop sharing my screen so that I can see you all if you have questions. And let me actually paste that Google form in here for you as well, in case you want it. All right, if not, enjoy your next session. It starts in 4 minutes, so hopefully you have time to use the bathroom or get some water, but I appreciate your time and I hope you have a great night.